Good morning, team. How are you? So today you get me because our fabulous Angela Paoli is out in Orlando. So she is out visiting Mickey right now. And so I am going to be your fabulous instructor for today. So welcome, welcome. We actually have an amazing, I think a really great topic today. I think just really timely right now in this market. So let's get to it. I want to talk about stellar seller services. Try saying that like 3 times fast, stellar seller services. But we really do want to talk about what are we doing for sellers right now that is making the difference and helping us to secure listings. So let me ask you this, and I'd love for you to throw it in the chat. You tell me, how are we doing right now with our seller presentations? Because given what we've got going on in this marketplace, we need to win how many listing presentations? Every single one that we're going on, right? So how are we feeling about those right now? Listing presentations. Feeling good? Need some work? Got to focus on these. All right. I love the good. How many of you have been watching the perfect listing presentation? I love it. Look at all these feeling goods. That's awesome. All right. Well, we are going to talk about honing in. Thank you, Alex, for telling us yours needs work, because in all reality, I bet every single one of us could improve aspects of our listing presentation. So we want to be able to talk about that today and some of the things you should be really focusing on to make sure that even if you feel like it's 95% of the way there, I want you to take the time to evaluate what could I be doing just that much better. And so, I think for a lot of us, we might say, I already have a great listing presentation, but I want to say, are you sure? What are the elements that I could be doing or including that are going to make it even that much better? Or, my listing presentation is great, and now that it's so good, maybe what I need to focus on is kind of the personal enhancement or the personal aspect of it that really kind of creates an individual experience, an experience where they can't get that from anybody else. The other question is, do many of you sort of feel like I'm just too busy to take a look at my listing presentation? My question to you is, right now is a perfect time to make sure that you are doing all the things right to ensure that you can convert every seller, because we don't have the luxury of so many listings right now. So what we've got to do is make sure that when we get the opportunity to get in front of a seller, we knock it out of the park and we're able to secure that client, right? The stakes are super high right now with inventory being the way it is. So, in my opinion, look, we all lose, but I want you going in recognizing I can't afford to lose. So I need to be on my A+ game. So I love Keith saying that you needed to sharpen your value prop. 100%. If you haven't taken getting what you're worth, that kind of weaves really nicely into your perfect listing presentation and really sort of teeing up the framework of how you operate and also guiding a client through the experience of, you helping them understand how to sell their home. So let's talk a little bit about the listing process overview. We're going to kind of touch on these 7 points today. The one is the initial phone conversation. I think that this is the money moment. This is the point at which you are able to immediately gain control as a professional, and from the very first conversation, be able to tee it up so that you can start understanding what is this potential client going to be like to work with. And then we're going to talk about emailing your digital listing presentation. How many of you are using the DLP right now as kind of a point of first contact? Like after you have a phone conversation, do you send the DLP along to either show them an overview of your capabilities, but maybe even giving them a very quick look at the market? So the challenge is through outreach to let people know. Oh, I'll get into the chat in a minute. But then also talking about dropping off the physical listing presentation. It's funny because in a lot of the classes I've been teaching for getting what you're worth, people, there was like half the class talks about how they don't do this step. And then the other half of the class talks about how they did and the success stories people got out of taking the time to drop off the physical listing presentation with a personal note card. They said it is a game changer. So if that's not something you're doing in your process right now, I really encourage you to rethink that. Yes, it takes you a little more time, but the reality is it's all the little things that you do that set you apart, that help them as they're deciding whether or not they want to work with you. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the home visit. I think this is really important. And I'm going to talk about kind of your mindset and how you want to approach the home visit. Then we're going to talk about the agent endorsement email, which is an amazing opportunity for you to get your managing broker to basically endorse that you're awesome, which is, again, a step that only we are doing right now as a company. And then emailing your final digital CMA before you close them. And then we're going to talk about how you need to be set up and your mindset and framework for the final meeting, being prepared for that. Because what is your ultimate goal, people, when you sit down for the final meeting? What is our goal? Share it in the chat. What's my goal when I'm there for the last time with the seller? Yes, Tammy. It is to get a signed listing agreement. So that's what we're going to talk about to ensure that you can do that as often as possible. All right, so let's talk first about the components of your initial phone conversation. So again, how many of you have taken Getting What You're Worth this year? Then this is going to be super familiar to you. If you have not taken Getting What You're Worth, write it down on your notepad right now. It is a non-negotiable. It is a class you have to take. It is going to be a game changer for you this year. And as we are kind of struggling to compete in the market because there's less volume going on, so it just means there's less transactions. Doesn't mean you can't have a stellar year. It just means that you have to make sure that every conversation you have, you knock it out of the park. So we're going to talk a little bit about the components of the phone conversation, but then we're going to actually kind of run through the dialogue. So, the phone conversation comes a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes it's a stranger, sometimes it's an email that comes in first, or sometimes you will get a phone call from someone who said, Amy, hey, Thad Wong and his wife, Emily, referred your name to us. We are thinking about selling our home, and we know you did a phenomenal job with them. How many of you in the chat have gotten that phone call where it is somebody saying, hey, you worked with so-and-so, they gave me your number, and that's why we're calling to inquire? We get a lot of those. If you are not getting a lot of those, your goal is to start building a business where you do. And so when you do get that actual phone call, right, the first thing that you're going to do is say, oh my God, I'm going to have to thank Thad and Emily for referring you, right? And just maybe reinforcing the idea that I work predominantly by referral. And so when a past client passes a name on, that means so much to me, right? So we talk a little bit about acknowledging the referral, but then we go through forward questions, right? We build a little bit of rapport. Maybe asking them about how they knew Thad and Emily, but then we do rather quickly get into our process and making sure they understand essentially how you work. And so that is your goal of this phone conversation, is to make sure that they really understand getting off of the phone, kind of how you operate as an agent and the steps that they can expect. And then also very important on this phone call, we've got a list of questions and we can send those to you, but there's a list of about 20 questions from Ninja that we encourage you to ask at the end of this conversation if the client has time. What it's giving you is when you ask these questions, it is going to allow you to make sure that you are starting to get a pretty good understanding of what their situation is, right? You don't want to be at the listing agreement, or I'm sorry, the final meeting, thinking that they're going to sign that day. And then you find out, oh, it's an estate, it's their parents' estate, but they have 10 more siblings and all 10 siblings have to sign as well, right? It's information that would be really great to know as soon as possible. So a lot of those questions allow you to make sure you start figuring stuff out about this client. And then your goal as you wrap up this phone conversation is to schedule the home visit. That's really sort of the next step in all of this. So I want to kind of just take you through the dialogue of the phone conversation. And here's what I'm going to encourage you. Again, if you've taken Getting What You're Worth, I hope that you have this pinned up outside of, in your bathroom. I hope that you've got a copy of this in your car, because we've really encouraged agents to really practice this script. I'm telling you, it works. It's so much so that I'll tell you a funny anecdotal story. There's an agent out of Lake Forest, Andra O'Neill, who does a pretty good business up in Lake Forest. And probably about 4 years ago, it was before COVID, when I was still managing the Lake Forest office, she and I were on our way to a broker open together, and her phone rang. And the phone conversation went like this: "Hi, Andra, my name is Susie, and I got your name from one of your past clients. And they suggest, Bob, and Bob suggested I reach out to you." So the funniest thing is that Andra went immediately into this script. She said, "Oh my God, I love Bob. It was so fun to work with him. And I'm going to have to call him after this or reach out and tell him and say, thank you so much for passing your name along, Sally." So the first thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I work, if that's okay. And then she went into, I have a 3-step process. And I was laughing because she didn't have a script in front of her, but I later on asked her, I said, "Did you do that conversation?" Because I was sitting in the car and I used to teach the class. And she said, "No." She said, "Once I learned that from the class," she said, "I use it every time." And I will tell you, Andra does a lot of business. She works with a lot of sellers, both low end, medium end, high end. And she said, "I just don't stray." She said, "Because I feel like it's a nice conversation that keeps me on track and makes sure that I hit what I need to." So she just says, "Let me tell you how I work. I've got a 3-step process. My first step will be to ask you a series of questions to get a better understanding of what your goals are and how I can help you in achieving those goals. Would you have time for that now?" Important to do the check-in to make sure that the client is listening and that what I'm laying out is making sense. The second step will be visiting your home, where I'd love for you to take me around if I were a buyer. I'm going to take a lot of notes, and it will help me get a clear understanding of how I'll be able to analyze your home in our current market. Are you available to do that in the next few days? Then, after I've previewed your property, I'll go back to my office and put together a comprehensive market report and sales strategy for your home. I usually have this done within 24 hours of my home visit. We'll schedule a time for you to come to my office for us to talk through the plan I put together to sell your home. If everything looks good and sounds good, we'll get a listing agreement signed and determine our timeline to get started. How does that sound? So tell me in the chat, what is so significant, I think, about making sure that I've laid out all of these particular points for the client? By laying out these points, it gives them the opportunity to object, right? But what did I also let them know? By meeting 3, I am expecting them to do what? Yes, thank you, Robbie. Setting the expectation that the listing agreement will be signed. So critical. That's on the first phone conversation. And the thing is that if they have any objections, you want them right away. You want to make sure that they basically say to you, no, to meet, right? The more we can get objections out right away, the sooner we know what kind of client we're working with, the better off we're going to be. So I really encourage you to practice that script. It is going to help you in so many different situations. Check out the expansive version on the listing presentation class, or if you take Getting What You're Worth, we really dive into the psyche of that conversation. Super important. Yep, Krista, it shows that you're organized and you have a plan. So important. And yes, Dave, you're in control. All right, so once you have a fabulous conversation and you set up a time for the home visit, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to email your DLP with an initial CMA immediately after the first phone call. Now, again, why would this be so important? I think it shows how easy it is for you to use technology. I think it shows what amazing tools you have. And it also shows just how interested you are in servicing them at a very high level. So you can create a Here we say 1 or 2 potentially relevant properties, but you could even just send 10. And you could just say, look, this is just sort of like a kind of a brush of the landscape of what's been happening in your market right now. After the walkthrough, I'm going to be able to really determine how to narrow in on the comps that make the most sense for your house. But what it's doing is it's showing how easy it is for you to pull this information quickly. And it also allows them to start looking at properties, right? And if you do a digital CMA, you can start seeing what it is that they're looking at from what you've sent. The nice thing is that if you have your DLP already created ahead of time, meaning you've got 85% of it already done, then it's super easy to add a CMA, add the client's name, and write an intro phone call. Let me ask you this. How many of you have a DLP template ready to go so that if you got a call today, you would easily be able to turn around a digital listing presentation? Yes, Marion, I'm saying send a CMA before actually seeing the property. Again, it's a very broad, very just a general look at what's happening in their market. And you can preface it that way. But it gets the ball rolling because you want them to start seeing what's happening in the market. Doesn't mean that you are able to give them a price right then. And then you want to incorporate everything you need to show your value, right? To create a great first impression. One of the things I would encourage you to try is to upload a custom video and your marketing plan into the digital listing presentation. So a lot of agents are sending a quick video to say, hey, Mary, it was so great talking with you on the phone earlier. I wanted to put a little something together for you as preliminary information before we meet. Looking forward to going through this process with you. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to earn your business. Think about what it looks like if you send a video with your DLP. So that's the digital part of it. And yep, you could also incorporate a custom market report into the DLP. The beauty of it, Robbie, is what I want you to start thinking about are how can I make this a great presentation that I can send on to clients and really sort of wow them. The next thing is your physical listing presentation. I would not cut this short. A lot of people tend to just send the DLP and they don't do the physical drop off. Here's what I want you to do. You can never over impress someone, right? You can never do too much, in my opinion, to earn somebody's business or show your professionalism. And not everybody looks at stuff that you're emailing. So if you actually drop off the physical listing presentation and you make it really easy, you just mention on the phone call, that first phone call, that before you see them, you're going to be sending them some information and dropping something off. And you don't even have to, you can tell them they don't even need to be home. You just simply, leave it out on their front door and then you just text them that you dropped something off. But I will tell you, the game changer of them seeing the physical materials, it also shows them the quality by which you are going to work to represent their home, from the brochures to the direct mail, right? It's beautiful to see it online, but there is something about being able to physically touch or look at some of these materials. And then it allows you to customize it. If you've got really great personal stats, or you want to incorporate at property stats, you can incorporate any additional materials into this drop off. You can include your bio sheet, or if you have an agent brand book, if you've got client testimonials. And if you don't have any of this stuff ready to go, then what I want you to write down today is I need to sharpen up my drop-off pack. I need to make sure information about me is in there, that I have a page of client testimonials, that I've got my sample marketing collateral ready to go. And you simply have a nice handwritten note that says, I am really excited for the opportunity to earn your business. Can't wait to see you on Tuesday, Sally. Super easy. BombBomb is good with video if you want to use that, but it's also as easy as just doing it on your phone, and you can just upload it to, I think, to YouTube, or it's pretty easy to do. So what have we done? We've had a fabulous phone call. We have sort of teed up the first conversation. We've also outlined our process so that hopefully the seller knows what to expect If they have any questions or concerns, they can get them addressed by you. Then you go ahead and you send them an amazing digital listing presentation that does not take you a lot of time, because you've spent the time up front to create a great template and you know exactly what you're going to send to them when the opportunity arises. And then you should, like, I have agents who have physical listing presentations already lined up. Like, they've got 10 of them sitting at their desk, so that if they get this opportunity, they already have one with their marketing collateral in it. It already has their list of testimonials. It already has, their bio page in there. All of that stuff is prepackaged and ready to go, so they don't have to stress about it when they do get the call. So I'm asking you now, if you've got downtime, these are the types of things you can be working on so that you make an amazing impression. So we've just made an amazing impression and they haven't even met us live yet, right? We had a great conversation on the phone. We went ahead and sent them the DLP and we just dropped off some amazing collateral. So that is setting us up for an awesome home visit. But we want to make sure that we're really prepared for the home visit. So what we really need to think about is, how am I going to prep so that when I'm walking through that front door, I feel like I have a lot of information, because I've asked them a ton of questions from that first interview list that we talk about in the perfect listing presentation. But then I'm also doing my homework, right? I looked at things like details on the seller. I would really encourage you to Google your potential client. Find out what you can. Check them out on Facebook. See what they're all about. Don't go in blind. And then do all of the homework we're supposed to, right? Check out the property taxes. Get information on their mortgage history, right? Find out when they actually purchased the property. See if you can find out about any property liens. Maybe there's code violations. Again, these are all things that, if we need to, these are things that we can start learning about the home. And association information. If it's part of, a multi-unit, or it's a condo, or in a townhome association, you might want to call the management company ahead of time and just try to get some insight. Again, this is where you're starting to investigate the property so that you begin to have an understanding of what you're getting yourself into. I love it, Krissa. Yes, you can also check the seller on Forewarn. That can be really helpful. And she said she's found other properties they've owned that can help with the conversation. So again, this is your time to do that due diligence so that you can make sure that you are ready to go for the actual walkthrough. And so let's talk about the goals of the home visit. Again, it's about being prepared, and you want to be able to take control of the meeting, because again, the whole process of getting a listing presentation is a series of micro commitments, right? The first micro commitment is having a conversation with them on the phone and getting them to set the next appointment. Then as we go through the home visit, we're going to be engaging them and again, getting them comfortable with us. And that also means reconfirming all the information you already know about them from the phone conversation, reinforcing why they called you and why they want to move, where it is that they want to go, and what their time frame is. So the idea too is, when you walk in for a home visit, oftentimes the seller will say to you, well, what would you like to do first? And this is again where you take control of the meeting. And I encourage you to walk through the home first, because you're getting an opportunity to make small talk, build rapport, be able to ooh and ah about their home, which always makes them feel good. And remember, you're going to be taking really good notes so that you know all the good things, all the things that might be a roadblock, so that you can have conversations about it later. So you go through the home, and that's how I would pose it too. I would say to the homeowner, why don't we walk through the home first? I'd love to take notes. Let's talk a little bit about, what you're thinking from your home. And then we can sit down for another 15 minutes, 20 minutes and go through the materials I dropped off and any questions you might have or things that we may need to discuss. And so then it allows you to go ahead and do that. And then the other thing too is, after you do the actual walking through the house, you can sit back down and you can ask them if they have any questions about the listing presentation that you sent over or the DLP that you sent over. And if you phrase the DLP the right way when you send it, you can tell them that you aren't really going to have pricing until after the walkthrough. So they may push back on you and want a price on the spot, but there's lots of different ways that you can just, ensure them that, you going back to your office and getting them a really accurate price or price range is going to be the most beneficial for them. But at this time, the goal of the home visit is to make sure you see as much about the home as possible. You build rapport, you go through any questions that they have, but you're really teeing it up for that final closing meeting. So there's questions. Do you go over the whole physical listing presentation if they've already seen the DLP? Carissa, I take their lead. And what I mean by that is if I drop off the listing presentation, I mark the pages that I think are the most significant for them to see and understand. And then I'll just ask them if they've had a chance to take a look at the materials and if they have any questions. And if they haven't really taken a look at it, part of what I would say at that point is I would say, not a problem, but before we meet on Friday, to kind of go through the listing agreement and make sure that we're ready to move forward, here are a couple of the pages that I think will be really valuable for you to take a look at. And then what I would also do is I would also at that meeting say to the seller, I would try to articulate my value proposition. And so what I would say to them at that point is, ask them if they have any questions. And if they don't, then I would say, sometimes when I'm at this meeting, clients oftentimes ask me, what are the things that differentiate me from any other agent? So I'd love to share with you, I think the top 3 things that are most important for you to know about me and how I work. And then you go into your value pitch. So in this meeting, I think the most critical thing you can do is make sure they understand why and how you're different. They're already seeing it, but set yourself up for the opportunity to be able to explain why. And then as you're going through this process too, what you're going to start seeing is, are there going to be these big roadblocks? Are we going to have issues with, for some reason, not being able to show the property? Is the property condition bad? Are they thinking about an unrealistic price? So these, as you look at all of these are all the things that you're recognizing you either are or are not going to have to talk through with them when you are, working through this process. So, during the home visit, in that first conversation, these are the big roadblocks we want to start deciding on, can we overcome these with the seller? And I think also importantly, do we want to? I think it's really important to remember that this is about you deciding whether or not you want this client just as much as it's them interviewing you. And so what you want to be thinking about too during this home visit is if there's going to be some roadblocks that you have to overcome, how are you going to be able to help them do that? And that is things like home renovation, stagers, organizers, designers, contractors, all of those things. Maybe they want a really long close, but they want to sell right now, right? You can talk to them about some of these different scenarios that you're seeing in the market right now, like some of the long closing timeframe options that are happening with from buyers to sellers, and even some of the rent back options, right? So what I want you to be thinking about now, though, is what might come up so that you can be best prepared to have those conversations. That's right, Keith, those darn elephants in the room, right? And then this is a new thing that is absolutely amazing. You now can have an agent endorsement email from your managing broker. This is different than the Christie's endorsement letter for luxury listings. This is an email from your managing broker. You can go to Platform and be able to request it. And it can be sent via email and it'll be signed by your managing broker. Super easy, but what an awesome way to show a reinforcement of you as a professional, your, superior or your boss, however you want to refer to it, your managing broker really endorsing you as an agent. Something again that is going to set you apart. So don't skimp on these types of steps. And then after the home visit, what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and in the next 24 hours, we are going to tighten up our CMA, right? We've seen the house. We see, what are some of the things that are great. We see some of the things that might be struggles. So we're able to really fine tune that digital CMA. So we can actually now update that CMA And then we can make sure that we get that sent out to the seller before we meet them for the closing meeting. And here's why I think this is so important. You want them to have the opportunity to look through the comps and not really be seeing them for the very first time on the day that you're trying to close them, because they're going to spend more time concentrating on, these different properties, them trying to decide whether or not, what you picked makes sense. You're better off giving them to them ahead of time so that they can look at them. And then you just instruct them and say, look, I'm sending this to you before we get back together in my office on Thursday. If you have the opportunity, I'd encourage you to look through the market analysis that I put together, and then we'll talk in detail on Thursday about where we're going to position your home. But giving them that opportunity to look at it ahead of time, I think makes a very big difference, and it increases the odds of them getting comfortable saying yes on the spot when you're closing them in that final meeting. And then what you can do is you can email it. You can also text or do a quick follow-up call to make sure that they got it. Because you want to make sure you have every shot in this final meeting to get them to sign the paperwork. One other thing that isn't necessarily outlined here, but I really encourage you to do, is when you're at the home visit, before you leave, I would encourage you to leave the listing agreement with them. And you can tell them, I want you to take a look at this, because when we get back together on Thursday, I want to make sure you're comfortable with all the details in the listing agreement so that if we're ready to move forward, we can go ahead and sign it that day. Again, you want to prepare them that your goal is to get them to sign the listing agreement. And if they push back, that's okay, but you'd rather that they push back early so that you then can kind of prepare your strategy, again, to make sure that you either close them that day or can have a strategy to make sure that you can close them as quickly afterwards. So getting them the listing agreement so they can review it. And I would encourage you to actually highlight the most important points. I know a lot of us get nervous about commission and the length of the agreement, but I will tell you, the more you feel confident and show your confidence by giving them the listing agreement, marking or highlighting the most important parts and saying, my clients really appreciate that I give them the time to take a look at this ahead of time so that they can understand, what the agreement says, and it makes it easier for them to sign it when we're together, when we get back together. The more confident you are when you say that, they're going to review it. They may push back, but oftentimes, 70% of sellers do not even push back on the agreement or commission. So be confident in presenting it to them so that when you get to this final meeting, again, you've sort of laid everything out. You're going to be able to review the CMA. They're going to have already seen it. You're going to be able to, work through the questions that they might have and then get to a great decision together on where to position it. And then you're going to be able to take them through your marketing and your marketing strategy, marketing and sales strategy, right? And be able to talk about your process and timelines. And then ultimately, you're going to be able to review the listing paperwork, see if they have any questions. And the goal is to ask them to sign that day. You want to ask for the business. And I know that that sometimes can be uncomfortable, but that really is our job. It isn't their job to just know when to sign. You need to take control from beginning to end. And if there are any elephants in the room, remaining roadblocks, you want those out. You've got to lean into the idea that they might ask some uncomfortable questions. And we can't go through all of those today, but I have a ton of materials that you can work through from the perfect listing presentation that goes through every objection that you will get in that meeting and how to respond. So take a look at it so that you'd be ready when they do ask the tough questions. You feel really confident and are able to, knock it out of the park and get the listing agreement signed. And this is an example of a marketing plan, making sure that you include a marketing plan that's specific to their address. There is something about it when Paul and Sally see their home address and then a list of all the things that you are going to execute for them. We have great overview information in our listing presentation. We've got beautiful materials, but there is something about Paul and Sally seeing this is specifically what's going to be done and executed for my property. So do all of you have a marketing plan right now that you incorporate into your listing presentation? That's a question that needs a response. Yes, I love it. All right, if you do not have one, we have a ton of examples on at Academy, but yes, I'm so glad that you do, because it's so important to show them that you're taking the time to do something specific for them. And then the other thing that's really great is showing them the timeline. You know, there's a lot going on. So how many of you right now use a calendar where you even guesstimate like, hey, if we sign the listing agreement today, here's where I've already teed up a photographer to come in for pictures. Here's where we're going to go ahead and, you know, spend some time getting the stager to come in. If you don't use a calendar, I really encourage you to use it. It's super helpful. It's a nice visual. And yes, it is an assumptive close. You're sort of assuming that they're going to say yes, but that's what you want to do. You want to assume that you're going to get the business and they're going to have to just tell you no, right? So you do all of these things to say, hey, look, I'm ready to roll. You know, if we sign this listing agreement, I'm going to get the stager in on Tuesday, like we talked about. I'd love to get photos done the week after. And I would say we get onto the PLN by X date, you know, taking control of the process and making them feel confident that you've got this. That makes a huge difference. And this timeline can be super helpful. And then again, reviewing the listing paperwork with all the tough stuff, commission, designated agency, dual agency, you know, when it's going to be entered into the MLS. But again, if you give this to them at the walkthrough with the highlighted info that they should know about, I'm telling you, it is a really big confidence move. They're going to feel so much better to have time to review it. Odds of them signing it when you get back together are going to go up. So think about making sure that you give that to them on your way out, because you don't want to answer all those questions at the walkthrough, right? So you want to do it at the very end. But then make sure you tell them we're going to review this when we're back together in my office on Thursday. And then if they aren't signing the listing agreement, or if you're sort of in a stuck spot, you got to just ask them, what remaining questions or concerns do you need to have answered today so that we can move forward? You've got to go for it, guys and gals. I know that it's really tough and we don't always want to push people, but you just have to say, you know, what else do you need in order for us to be able to work together? And some of them might say, we're good, let's get going. Others might say that they're concerned about something. That's great. Circle back, talk about the concerns, work through it with them, and, you know, make sure that they feel like they're really being heard. You've got, you know all of the answers and you know exactly what you need to do. I think where we hiccup sometimes is we're afraid to ask this really direct question. But I'm telling you, if we tiptoe around it, we're going to leave this meeting without a listing agreement. And the concern is if they're talking to anybody else who is this direct, that person's going to get that listing agreement. So you really want to make sure you're asking that question so that you can be ready to go. All right, that was a lot. I know we kept on a little longer, but you know, talking about working with the seller, there's a lot to it. So we've got homework for you, which is to take the DLP course and the digital CMA course in at Academy if you haven't yet. And then create a DLP. If you don't currently have one, I really encourage you to have a template or two, depending on the markets that you work in, and then create a practice CMA, continue to write your 2 note cards and make your calls. And then homework on 5/24, you're going to actually send out a real estate review, watch the perfect listing presentation course, continue to write 2 note cards. And then just remember, next meeting is next week. You've got your accountability group. You're going to be talking about and focusing on what you're doing with your listing presentations. And then small group meeting agenda will be posted in the app. So team leads, remember to log your meetings in the tracker. And then there's no programming on May 31st. So keep that in mind. We are using that as the Memorial Day holiday. But you got to go out and get it. Now is the time to secure as many of your listings as possible. So if you have the time, take the steps and change the things that you need to make yourself much more confident in going out and getting it. All right, team, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. You will see Angela in a couple weeks. I think she's riding Pirates of the Caribbean right now with Mickey and Minnie. But until then, make it an awesome Wednesday. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you guys soon.